first. Um, I don't know if you look at this exactly, but if you use the test generator, after you actually export it, you'll get this. This is just a page of instructions and stuff. But then you get, this is called like the resource sheet. And I'll be using this quite a bit. This is for Visioneer, which we haven't gotten to yet. That'll be next week, but this is somewhat useful for that. And then this is the main stuff that we'll be using today, which would be basically just, I guess you can just say the letters in order, and then the Baconian table. But if you were to have a Pollux or Morbit, they would give you a Morse code table. If you had a Xenocrypt, then they would give you the frequency table for Spanish letters too. But other than that, this is basically everything you get. You get each letter and what they are, the Visioneer table. This one, I don't remember, I don't know why this is here. This shouldn't be here, but this used to be for @bash, which is, we'll probably also get to next week. And this is the modular inverse. And also, yes, that'll be next week because that involves a lot more math than usual. So, very first thing, the plain aristocrat. This will be the time question every time. And remember, you want to get this done as fast as possible. So, with the aristocrat, it's literally just straight up, A can be pretty much any letter that's not A. And then F can be any letter that's not F. So, essentially, if there's no hint, you're just guessing as to which letter is which. And you can do that by following a couple of word patterns. And you can only really learn those word patterns from taking a bunch of tests and that kind of stuff. It just takes a bit of practice. And again, as I said last week, if you want to get a lot of practice on aristocrats so you can recognize word patterns, then you can always go to Puzzle Baron, cryptograms.org, and that's a great place to practice aristocrats. And that's pretty much where, yeah, it's just the best place. So, the thing is, let's talk about the two other main variants of aristocrat first. First, you have the K1, and how the K1 works is, instead of having the replacement be basically a random letter, which is what the first aristocrat, you would have a keyword. And the concept of the keyword is, the first word would be the keyword, followed by the alphabet. So if keyword was key, you'd see, and started here, you would see key EY, and then A, B, C, D, F, because you skip E because it's in there already. So that can be easier, it's usually easier, especially because if you've ever taken a look at the test thing, I forgot to put in the keyword actually, whatever, usually the keyword is, let's do key again, it almost always starts at offset 1. And if the event supervisor has no idea what they're doing, they don't change it off of offset 1. So usually you can kind of use that to your advantage. And as you can see, the replacement is exactly the way I described. Starts with key, and then has every other letter in order, except for the ones that you used in the keyword. And that makes K1 slightly different. And then you would also see K2. It's also an example. This used to be broken on this site, but I think John Tobes fixed it, so now it actually works. And instead of you change, so the replacement text, which would be these letters. So instead of, it's kind of hard to explain, but when you have this one, you look at this, you see, I don't know, U is S, right? But if I go to K2, instead of seeing U as S, you see S is U. That does make things slightly different. So this is the actual replacement. Sorry. So yeah. So instead of having it be an A, B, C, D order for the what will be up here, you have to put in the key there, which makes things slightly different. And you would have to basically gain experience with that. Yeah, this is actually quite a confusing concept. So you just kind of have to really think through it. I'm not really sure how to explain it better than that. It's basically the same with K1, but instead of your plain text being the one shifted with the key, it's actually the replacement text, which is something that is the only type of cipher that actually does this. And usually with K1, K2, you really see it with patristocrats because it makes patristocrat slightly easier, but still not that easy. But most aristocrats you'll find are just random. And in that case, It's basically just practice. You have to be able to understand. Oh, if I see these kind of letters a lot, usually if you see 3 letters at the end of a word a lot, it's almost always ing. That's just something how it is. Usually, you could use the letter frequencies, but in this case, so you see E is the most common letter, but it's not actually the most common one in this phrase, and there are quite a few, I forget the exact term, but there's one book that event supervisors really love. I think it's called Just Gatsby. It has no E's, and E is the most common letter. So a lot of people like to follow the letter frequency table. I usually don't. I always keep it in mind. I usually if there's one E and this in a really long sentence is probably not exactly right, but don't follow this frequency table that strongly because it's not always right. Okay? Yeah, but yeah, you probably want to know, just kind of know in your mind that E, T, A, O, and I and N, those are the most common English letters. So, and then usually we don't use very many Z's, but sometimes you will see people specifically put in sentences with a lot of Z's to throw you off. So again, don't necessarily follow this like it's always right, because it's usually not. So that's K1 and K2. Let's see. No, I think K2 might still be broken. Who knows? Yeah, usually you don't see K2, and I'm pretty sure the test generator doesn't work quite right for it. At least it didn't last year. But just know that it can be on the test. And I remember, yeah, last year it was pretty broken. I'm not sure why. Whatever. Let's move on. Anyway, the pretty much easiest thing you'll get is the Caesar cipher. And if you've heard of the Caesar cipher before, it's just a direct shift. So this is actually the same code as before. So what you see is you have like D, R, and O. What you would do is you would just find those letters, add one to each to it. So you E, S, and P, and then you just keep going on and on until you find a word that actually makes sense. And then in this case it would be the. And then you could use that shift, basically write it out, and just redo all of it. So yes, basically it's a straight up shift. Let me find a way to sort it. So it was like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then is a shift of 1 and B. B would turn into A, C would turn into B, etc. Okay? Yeah, so Caesar is really simple. Sometimes they'll ask you to encode it, sometimes decode it. If they have to encode it, they'll always just tell you the number. And it's basically gimme points. Anyone can do it unless you mess it up like I think Yash did back in the day. Anyway, so yeah, Caesar's really simple. And a lot of times just brute forcing it and getting it right. Sometimes instead of doing the whole word, I just do 2 letters at once. Like one time, yeah. So, but also, a trick you can do is you can kind of hold if you find 2 letters next to each other, like D and R, or no, sorry, what's 2 are pretty close. Um, like D and Y. I can just what I used to do is just put my fingers, one finger on D, one finger on Y, and kind of shift them instead of having to write them. So then I just shift from D and Y to E and Z, and then F and A, and then G and B, and that kind of stuff. Wait, I might have done that wrong, but whatever. Yeah, so that's basically a lot faster way to do it. But in the end, you'll still have to basically shift each letter. And it's not necessarily hard, but um, a lot of times if you guess really well, you do better. So um, the most complicated one for today is probably the Baconian. And the best way to explain Baconian is if you know anything about computer science, it's basically the letters in binary, in base 2. So if we go back up to the top of the sheet, you'll see these. This is the Baconian table. And you don't necessarily need it because essentially each one of these 5-letter pairs are basically ones and zeros in binary, and if you know how to calculate in binary, you can basically just use these numbers, except for the fact that I and J and U and V are combined. Why? Not entirely sure. Whatever. But usually you can pretty much just write both, but usually you can just assume it's probably I. And I probably shouldn't say assume, but just like those two are pretty much so not that important, so you can just kind of write both and you'll figure out at the end. So if you know how a base 2 system works, so you have 5 digits, it can either be a 1 or a 0, and in this case the 1 is a B or an A. And again, it doesn't have to be a B or an A. I saw some of the questions that you guys turned in. They can be any symbol, and in fact I'll show you in a quick second some of the other things that they do for Baconian. So what they do is they have each of these represents A is base 2 is kind of more complicated to explain, but so the first digit represents 1, 2 to the 0 power. Second digit is 2 to the 1 power, so 2. And then third digit is 2 to the second power. Did I say second power already? Second power 4, third power 8, fourth power 16. So if I have a 1 in that spot, I add that number. So this is all zeros, so it's 0. A is 0, right? And then B is 1, etc. And by the end you get the Z. Z is what, 23, so 16 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1, 23. And again, that's because, not 25, because U and V and I and J are combined. So basically, a lot of times you can just use this chart. It will make your life pretty easy. But obviously sometimes you can't share, so you can kind of memorize this. After enough practice, you'll realize, okay, this pattern is always E, because E is really common most of the times, and then T is that one. So basically, I guess you could memorize it if you want to, but you don't necessarily have to because they do give it to you, but it does make your life easier. But Baconian's only hard if they do something, like I'll show you in a second. But in this case, this is cut and dry. It's basically just busy work. You divide it every 5 letters. You see, oh, B, A, B, A, that's T. A, B, 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 that's H, and then A, B, A, that's E. So the, and then you can just go along the line. It's not hard, it just takes a lot of time usually. So with the last thing you can do with Baconian, if I go back, let me see, Baconian. So letter for letter, and then sequence. Not entirely sure what sequence even means, to be honest. I really could not tell a difference between the two. But then the big other one is words. And the thing with words is, so you see it defaults to A, B, A, B, A, B, alternating for each of the letters. And most event supervisors don't change that, but sometimes they will. The whole point is this will generate like a list of words for each letter combination. This one says you can't find any word for that. It's tragic, whatever. But so in this case, you would have to recognize they don't always tell you what letter it is. Usually the ones to check are, yeah, obviously first A, B, A, B, A, B, I, B, because that's a default. And then the other one would be first half A through M are all A, second half is all B, that kind of stuff. So with that, another common one that I like to use, I always think about is vowels. So every vowel is a B. So basically, just know that you sometimes, if your event supervisor doesn't really like you, they'll end up just giving you this, force you to guess, and you have to basically think, what kind of distinction could they have? And also, usually they might give you a hint, be like the first word's the. So then you can be like, oh, okay, so these things have to correspond to a specific list. And that's very similar to Pollux and Morbid later that we'll look at. But, so yeah, that's basically about it for that. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but they can pretty much make whatever they want, A and B. So if I wanted to make it like, oh no, so someone put in some random symbols last time. One time we had like this, what was it, this, like that, and then, no, sorry, what was it? Who knows, there was some random symbols and they had to guess, and the distinction they never told you, so you had to guess with that. So that was a bit of a mess. It was not the easiest thing to do, and you just see this and you have no idea what it means. Right? So that's the only difficult part with Baconian. After you can figure out which one's A, which one's B, it's really easy. Anyone can do it. You have to use the chart, you have to use the chart, but by that point, you just divide by fives, the 5-letter sequences, you just solve for the letters, cut and dry, pretty easy. So I think that's about it. Let me see. Okay. So yeah. Let me check. Let me probably just show you cryptograms.org right quick. So this is the website I was talking about before. It's Puzzle Baron Cryptograms. All you do is usually just start it and just play. They time you, so if you want to do like, if you want to try it, and you probably should. It's a really good resource. You can also do hints if you want to. You don't have to, but it makes it go a lot faster. So yeah, I think that's about it. Usually if you have that, it's almost always that. The eye of. Sorry.
Before. Before.
It's before. You want to tell me it's before? Hello? Become.
Oof.
Now,
Yep, done. So yeah, Lindsay, you got it wrong. Whatever the case. So they'll tell you how fast you were, that kind of stuff. Really great place to just practice the aristocrats, which is really good for the timed question especially. Actually, one thing I should note too is also sometimes they'll give you spelling errors. Doesn't really make it that different. Just know that there can be spelling errors, and a lot of times there'll be like a phonetic miss. It'll be like, yeah, of may intentionally be misspelled as uv. Of, you can consider it the same word. Basically, imagine like a 5-year-old was writing it or something. So that's the kind of stuff they do. Yeah, and this would be Protogram. We'll get to that in a while. So yeah, I think that's about it for today. If you have any questions, you can just ask them now. If not, you can leave. Thanks, everyone.